All right, good afternoon. Welcome to another Vulcan Trader webinar. So today the focus is going to be on the breakout setup and how that setup works and the configuration and settings that come with that particular setup. And I think before we jump into the specifics of how to execute that setup in Vulcan Trader, I do want to just quickly go over what I mean when I'm talking about a breakout setup. I think most traders are probably familiar with it, but we'll quickly just review it. And we don't really even have to go over an example because today was a light volume session, so we didn't really have any breakout trade. But the idea is that we're looking for a sideways trading range, and then we're looking for a decisive move outside of that range. So let's pretend that, this is the range we're working with, and the market kind of consolidates here, and let's pretend that there was actually a breakout bar to the upside, kind of like this, and it would look something along the lines of this, right? So this pattern, the sideways consolidation and congestion, followed by a decisive breakout bar taking us outside of that range, this would qualify as a breakout. And the way to trade that particular setup is to buy it on the break above the relevant range. Now, typically for breakout setups to work, you want to see at least about 80% relative volume. So in light volume environments, breakouts do have a tendency to fail. And as we jump into the program settings, you'll see that relative volume is something that gets taken into account within the program itself. So the setup, like I said, is straightforward. It's a sideways trading range. It can be on a 5-minute chart, 30-minute chart, daily chart. It doesn't matter. The markets are fractal. But for our purposes here, we're going to focus on day trading. So a sideways trading range, a decisive move outside of that range on sustained momentum in that direction. So a breakout is a momentum-based setup, and that's why if we're going to get a successful break, upside or downside, you want to see some decent momentum in that direction, and a lack of momentum would be another warning sign that the breakout may not succeed. So that being said, let's jump into the settings of that particular setup before we get to the specifics of it and how to use the program to execute it. So in the settings, we have a first one, it's called Breakout Level Entry Offset, and this is in points. And what this is saying and telling the program is that if your breakout level, let's say the balance area high or the range high that you're currently referencing is, let's say, 33.83, then what this offset is saying is that my entry to trade that balance area breakout is going to be 2 ticks above the breakout level, right? So that's the offset over here. So if you set this to 1, then it's going to say that by default, if I'm taking a breakout trade, my entry is going to be 1 point above the balance area or the breakout level. The next setting is breakout level entry limit in points. So the way that we are executing the breakout setup is by using stop limit orders, right? So we're placing a stop above the market in the case of a breakout or below the market in the case of a breakdown. But we don't just want to use a stop market because then your fill might not be all that great. And if it's a highly volatile market, then a market order could get filled even 2 or 2.5 points away from your intended entry price. So in order to provide some layer of protection around that stop entry, we can set the breakout level entry limit. So we use stop limit orders. And what this is saying is that my maximum that I'm willing to pay to get on board is 1.5 points above the breakout level. So this is the entry offset. This is where that order is going to reside or trigger. And then 1.5 points above the breakout level entry, you're saying, hey, I don't want to pay more than 1.5 points beyond that level. So it's a way to kind of protect your entry and make sure that you don't get a terrible fill. The next setting here is relative volume minimum for breakout. So this is telling the program what is the minimum relative volume that we should be seeing in the market in order for the breakout setup to really be a successful or higher odds setup. Now, setting this to 75% doesn't mean that the program won't let you take a trade when the relative volume is less than 75. All this does is it will highlight the entry for that breakout. It will highlight it as yellow to give you a warning that, hey, in this environment, the breakout is kind of risky, so at least be mindful of what you're doing. Have that awareness that the relative volume doesn't support the breakout setup. And, we'll just make this like 85% for now, just so we can see it in action. The scale by default is the same as in the other setups. So if you want the program to give you a scale out and set the targets up for that first scale out, then you would leave this as true. Over here, you are telling the program where you want to scale out of your first part of the position. So the value of 1 means that your first scale out target is going to be at 1R. And then this is just like the other trades, right? The scale target percentage is how much of your position do you want to scale out. So if you set it at 33, then a third of your position is going to be exited at the first scale out target. Then you have the high probability target percentage. So this is, okay, how much of the position do you want to exit at the next target, target 2, and then we have target 3, which is the extended target, and that gets calculated automatically by deducting the first 2 from 100. The setup cancel time enabled tells the program that if I have a pending breakout order and it hasn't been filled yet, then automatically cancel it at this particular time. And I think the default is 2:50 Central Time. It can be earlier, whatever works for you. But if you set this to true, then it will automatically cancel any unfilled breakout setup order by this specified time. If you set it to false, then it will let it go until the market hits the flattened time that you may have enabled. The stop management thresholds are exactly like the other setups. So at 1, 2, and 3R, the stop is going to be tightened systematically. And again, the most that it can move to is your entry price. So if your entry price is, let's say, 33.80 for the breakout, then and let's say your original stop is 75, well, the most that it'll move it to is 80. So it's not going to move it into profitable territory, but it will move it to break even, but it does it in these kind of 3 steps, right? So it doesn't move it to break even right away. It does it based on how much the market has moved in your favor. So it's a systematic way of managing your stop consistently across every breakout trade that you take. So these are the settings for the breakout. Now, in terms of how you would actually go about executing it in practice, so there are a couple of ways that you can set up this trade. One is that if, let's say, we have the zone 78.5 to 82.5 and you want to trade a breakout above it, well, you can simply hit IBB and it'll create this breakout level and order for you, right? So you can see that the zone high is 82.50. A breakout is going to be outside of that zone. So the breakout level is 82.50. The entry, if you recall, we had that entry offset set to 2 ticks. So by default, the entry is 2 ticks above 82.50. And then for the stop loss, it uses the volatility stop, right? So that's where this setting is coming into play. So it's using the volatility stop, and it will also look at your min stop, right? So it will use whichever one is greater. So in this case, you can see volatility stop we have set to 4.5, so that's what it does. If we set this to 5 and we reset, you can see the stop moves to 78. So the volatility stop setting is something that should be reviewed on a daily basis and at the very minimum a weekly basis to make sure that all of these settings up top are aligned with the current volatility regime. So once you've figured out, okay, this is the breakout I want to take, the environment supports it, that's where you would hit submit. The order would go in the book, and if the market reached 83, it would fill your order. So after that, it's going to work the same way as the other setups. It will show you your open risk. It'll show you your, trade P&L. The exit next target works the same way as the other setups. If you hit it once, it's going to exit you out of the scale target portion of your trade. If you hit it again, it'll exit you out of the high probability portion. And if you hit it again, it'll exit you out of the extended target. So it does it in those 3 tranches, essentially. And managed stop works exactly the same way as well. You have your expected R, review the targets, right? So if you attended this morning's pre-market call, then we went over setting targets, and by default the program is going to look to the next 2 or 3 zones to determine targets, but you as the trader then have to review those targets to make sure that they make sense. For example, 3411 does not make sense. Now if you want to make the extended target the same as the high probability target, a quick way to do it is just by double clicking on extended target, and that works across the board throughout the program. If you double click extended target twice, it'll set it to whatever the value is for a high probability. So in this case, you're saying, hey, I want to buy 83, I want to scale to 88, which is 1R. My next target's going to be up at the next zone at 99.75, and my extended target by default was the zone after that, except this is a range extreme, so probably not going to get hit today, so we don't want it, right? So that's kind of how this gets set up. And same thing to the downside. If we had a situation, for example, where we're saying, hey, if the pre-market support gets taken out, or if there's a bull bear zone, and we're thinking, hey, if this gets taken out, control can shift from one side to the other. Well, then you can create an IBB by clicking on that particular zone, and you can see it creates a sell short order for you. And again, it's 2 ticks below the bottom of the zone now because it's a balanced breakdown setup, and everything else is the same. The other way that you can create this setup is by clicking on single level zone. So over here you would type in whatever the breakout or breakdown level is that you're working with. So let's say that the market's kind of consolidating, balancing, and you want to buy a breakout above even let's say 33.78, right? So you could do that, and it would create this additional line for you at the 78.50 level, right? So here's the 78 breakout, and you can adjust this. If you're using a lot of breakout setups, then you would give this grid a little bit more room, and all this stuff is adjustable on your screen. And I do recommend dedicating a full screen to the Vulcan Trader app because if you start shrinking this down, you can still work with it, but it's not as easy, right? You start getting horizontal scroll bars, and then you have to kind of go back and forth. So if you are using multiple screens and you can dedicate one screen just to order management and execution, then the best setup is to use Vulcan Trader in full screen mode, and that way you have access to everything, and it's visual, it's available to you all at the same time. So that is how the breakout setup works. Of course, today, the environment wasn't really conducive to taking breakouts, right? We were running on lighter volume. The market was quite choppy. So as we discussed in the morning, it wasn't really the ideal environment for taking breakout setups. And in this morning's case, the pullback setup would work better. And we'll actually cover that as well because we do have some time. The breakout setup is much more straightforward. But if you have any questions on the breakout setup as it pertains to Vulcan Trader, feel free to post it here, and I'll get to it towards the end of the call. At this point, the next setup that we'll cover is the pullback continuation. Now, I'm not going to get into the methodology part of the setup, right? So we're not going to discuss what makes a good pullback continuation setup in this particular webinar. We will have a separate webinar where we simply discuss methodology, and that way, we'll have dedicated time just for that. But the purpose of this webinar is to really get everyone up to speed on how to use the software, not how to actually identify the pullback continuation. Armando saying my relative volume is showing 56%. So my program is in playback mode and it's using the playback connection. So don't worry about relative volume. It's going to be off. Yeah, because this is in playback mode and doesn't have all the historical data and all that, right? So yeah, so don't worry about this. If anything, I think I should change the minimum to, let's say, 90%. And then you can see when I do that, right? All the entry column, the entire thing gets highlighted in yellow. And it's simply saying, hey, this is an alert that the relative volume is not really optimal for this particular setup. And
Order submitted.
And if I submit it, right, so I just submitted the order, you can see that you also get a message, a warning down here that tells you that the relative volume, which is right now, according to the playback connection, whatever, 86%, is less than the minimum for the intraday balance breakout setup, which is 90%, right? So whatever setting you use over here, that is going to be used in highlighting this cell, this entry cell, and also it's going to throw this warning message for you as well. So really, with this program, the idea is not that it's going to trade for you. It's that it's this constant assist, right? It's this assistant. It's helping you trade better. It's not going to trade for you. The whole idea is that it's going to structure your trading. It's going to provide you with reminders, things that when you're looking at the charts and kind of, in the moment, they might skip your mind. So with the Vulcan Trader program, we can set it up where it provides those reminders, and they're just-in-time reminders, right? So they're not meant to be annoying or distracting. Like everything that has gone into this program, again, has had that core mission of helping traders perform better and helping them perform better with this particular methodology, right? So we were pretty careful in throwing messages and message boxes and things like that because we don't want to get in the way, right? Like the program should not get in the way of your trading. It should simply assist and kind of keep you in the right setups, help keep you out of the wrong setups, throw errors or warnings when it makes sense. And then aside from that, just let you trade. So, in this case, you can see it doesn't meet the relative volume, so it's giving you a warning, like, hey, this is probably not a good idea. And, it helps ensure that you're not taking impulsive trades, right? Like you probably noticed that even today, for anyone who used it to trade the market today, it keeps you out of these, crappy impulsive trades, which are so easy to get into when you're trading off of a ladder, right? Because there's no kind of intelligence behind the ladder, right? Like it's purely made to get you to trade. This program is not made to get you to trade, right? If anything, it's made to help you trade less and help you take higher quality trades. So that's the kind of philosophy behind it. And then, if you notice that and you see the message, maybe that's enough for you to cancel, the order and save yourself a potential loss, right? So anyway, let's continue on with the pullback continuation setup. So with the pullback continuation, we have a couple of things here. One is we have that dynamic Fibonacci retracement that is built into the program and the indicators, which is really a nice to have, right? Visually, it's really cool, and it just really speeds up that execution for pullbacks. Whereas, I feel without it, it's a little bit harder to determine the actual entry price. So even this morning, when we were discussing potential trades and whatnot, I had this set to long, right? And we had it set to, I think, 70 quarter is what we had it set to, right? So we had it set to this. So the way this works is, you can see the fib retracement over here on the chart, and then you can use the arrows to make sure that it is putting the swing low or swing high at the right spot where you want it, right? So in this case, we had it over here at 70 quarter. That was kind of the relevant swing low. So by default, it's going to pick, kind of the more apparent or obvious swing low, right? So for example, if I just turn this off and I hit long, by default, it picks the more obvious swing low because this is kind of the key swing low, right? Everything else is kind of chop in between. But then as a discretionary trader, you can decide whether that entire swing is relevant to the pullback that you want to trade. Now, I would argue that, this entire swing from overnight low to overnight high is not really the one that is as relevant, right? The idea is that the market is already balanced, it's now breaking out, and this is kind of the base that it broke out from. So we can hit, the key over here, or we can even use like the mouse roller. If you just kind of hover over this, and you can quickly get to the swing that you want, and once it's set, then you can leave it as is. If you want to unplot this from your chart, then you would simply uncheck plot, right? And if you put it back in, you can see it comes back up here as a visual aid. And as the market makes new highs, it will automatically adjust. It's anchored to 70.25. And over here, you're seeing, kind of the anchor time. You are also seeing what you want the stop loss to be set to. So by default, it's going to set the stop to the next retracement level, right? So you can see that we have an entry at 75.50. The stop is 70.5. So it looks at the next retracement level, but it also is going to make sure that it is using that minimum stop that you've already set, right? So all that goes into it to figure out where the stop goes. So in this case, the level is 75.50. At the minimum, we want the stop to be behind 74.5. And in this case, it is actually setting it, down at 70.50. If I change this, by the way, to 78.6, then it'll make sure that all the stops are behind the 78.6% retracement. And if I change this to anchor, because there are times where, we actually want our stop to be completely beyond a given swing, then I can set that to anchor. And what it'll do is it'll make sure that my stop loss is below 70.25. So you can see in this case, the stops are all below 70.25, and it's still using that minimum stop, and the volatility stop goes into play here as well. So, the vol stop setting is quite important to make sure that it makes sense. Don't use like a unrealistically tight or unrealistically wide setting over here. This really has to kind of line up with the volatility situation. And the auto update over here basically means that as the market extends this swing higher, the order will automatically update. So that's what it's saying. So for example, if I say that I want to buy the 38% retracement and I submit this trade, and then the market makes another high and now the 38 happens to be higher, it will automatically adjust my entry to be higher. Now, if you don't want the program to automatically update the entry for you, personally, I think that's a great feature because, if you want to buy a 38% retracement, then you want to buy a 38% retracement. The price on its own doesn't matter as much. So if you don't want it to update though, let's say you do want to just stick with, whatever price you set, then you would uncheck auto update, and then this will not update anymore. It'll stick to whatever it is. If you change this entry price, just make sure that you hit this if that's the exact entry you want. Otherwise, if auto update is checked, it will continue to update this particular level to be in alignment with the retracement level as the market makes new swing highs and lows. So be mindful of that. The other feature here is you do have the option of trading half size. So whatever your R is set to, let's say you're risking 1%. Well, if you hit half size, it'll be risking 0.5%. So you do have the option of doing that. And again, it's only available for the pullback continuation setup because the PC setup, in my opinion and experience, after mentoring a lot of traders, is the most complicated setup to really master. And so by providing that half size option, it's a good way to practice the pullback continuation with less risk. The other situation where the half size might be helpful is if you want to take half at 38 and half at 50, right? So let's say that you were dealing with a bigger swing, and let's say you wanted your stop to be actually beyond the 61.8, and you wanted to trade 38 and the 50. Well, if you did that, then you could take half at both if you wanted to split it up that way. Like that would be another viable way of using that feature. The other feature that I want to point out is this aggressive entry checkbox. So what this does is it tells the program that there is so much momentum in the market that you want to get on board, not just at or near the 38%, but ahead of it. You want to front run the retracement levels, right? So if you hit aggressive entry, you can see that all the entries get more aggressive, right? If we uncheck it, see how it's set to 75 half, 74 half, 73 half. If we do aggressive entry, they all get more aggressive, and you start to front run the level. So now you can see we are front running each level by 6 ticks, right? Or 1.5 points. So each level is now being front run by 1.5 points. And of course, that is a setting that you control. So if we go into the program settings, go to pullback continuation, you can see that the first setting is the stop distance behind next retracement level. So what this is saying is that how far below the retracement level, or in the case of shorts, above the retracement level, do you want the stop loss to go by default? So what we're saying here is that, put the stop 2 ticks beyond the next retracement level. You can see the aggressive entry offset. That's what controls how aggressive the orders get when you check off that aggressive entry button. We have it set to 1.5 points. You can set it to whatever you want. Everything else, for the most part, is the same. Scale by default, true. That means it will give you a scale out target. What's the default scale? What is the scale target percentage? So how much of the position do you want to take off at the scale out target? How much do you want to take off at the high probability target? And so on. Do you want to cancel the setup at a particular time? Because if it's too late in the day, maybe you don't want to bother with pullbacks. So if you have a pending pullback that hasn't been filled, when do you want to cancel it? You can set that here. The stop management thresholds are the same as well. The only other difference between the scale out target for pullback continuation and the other orders or other setups is that the first scale out by default will be either at 1R or at the swing high. Okay, so let me explain. So with a pullback continuation setup, visually, this is what it looks like, right? You have a thrust up that looks like this. you have a 38 or 50% kind of normal retracement that looks like that. And then in the event of a successful pullback continuation, it can look, something like this. And the inflection point that really kind of helps determine whether this is a successful pullback continuation or not is the original or the first swing high. So the way the application is programmed, by default, it will give you the scale out right at the swing high because that's the inflection point. That is where you're going to find out if it's working or not working. So it's a good place to take some risk off if you're not sure, or if you want to play defense, that's a good place to take some risk off. So this is kind of what the retracement looks like. You can see we're coming into a 50%, so we're buying it here, and then when it goes up, it's going to scale out over here for you automatically. Now, if this happens to be more than 1R, then the scale out will be lower. But if 1R is higher, it's not going to matter. The first scale is always going to be at the swing high by default. Now, of course, those are all things that you can change, but by default, that's where it will be because, again, the PC setup is a setup where I've seen a lot of traders struggle with it. I've seen traders just, overall have a lot of challenges with that setup. So when we were creating this software, I had it done where at that first swing high, we're taking risk off because I think that's going to give everyone the best shot at getting some success on the pullback setup. Because when it doesn't work, right, let's say it's a failed pullback setup, it might look something like this where it maybe makes a marginal high or doesn't even make a new high, and then it turns around and starts balancing yet again. And at that point, it's not a pullback setup anymore, right? So, so that's how the targets are being calculated, and that's why you'll see over here that the scale R is not 1R, right? That's because of the swing high. Because right now, on this playback, you can see a swing high 79. So by default, it's going to set your scale target to 79. So again, these are things that get calculated by default, but you should still review them. Again, it's not that the program is trading for you. It's just assisting you and structuring your trading. So review the targets, right? Like if the 99.75 doesn't make sense as a extended target, change it, right? You can double click it and change it to 89.25, right? So if you want to change it, you can do it like this. And that gives you a bit of an idea on, which retracement is going to give you kind of that 2R that you're looking for, right? So in this case, in order to get that 2R, even 75.50 would give it to you as long as you got 89.25 out of it, right? So that's being done over here. And, if we submit this.
Order submitted. Order submitted.
This does go into the books as a resting order or a limit order. And now when the market comes into it, it'll automatically, of course, fill you and then give you that scale, and it'll automatically adjust the orders if the market makes a new swing high. So in this morning's case, for example, let me go ahead and speed up the chart here. It's the beauty of playback. We can get to it pretty quickly. So you can see the swing high went to 80. Now it's going to 80.75, right? And it's dynamically adjusting and expanding that fib, and it's also adjusting your orders, right? Originally our order was a little bit lower, but it's actually adjusting the order.
Order filled.
Now it just filled us on the 76.75 with half size.
Order filled.
And now it just filled the remaining half. Now the open risk here will still show you 1R, by the way, because it's still kind of showing you, your risk on that particular trade. And similar to the other orders, if you want to scale out, then you would just hit scale, right? Let's say that, market's running on low volume. Let's say you don't want to wait for 81 or 80.5, you could just hit scale,
filled.
And it'll just hit your scale out right there at market, right?
Target filled.
And as it does that, it's showing you your open risk, the P&L. If you hit 73.75, it will essentially move your stop to that level. So you can right click, it'll show you these options, right? There's your entry, there's your zero risk stop, and the swing stop, and the original stop. So if you hit this, it'll adjust your stop to 73.75, for this one to 74, and if you want to adjust your targets, again, you can do it right here. If you want to plot the order and visualize the trade itself, it works the same way as the other trade setups. You can hit plot order and it will plot it for you. If you want to get rid of the fib, let's say you're seeing it here, you don't want it on your chart, just uncheck plot, that'll go away, right? So that's the idea. Okay, so that covers the pullback setup as well. So at this point, we've covered the zone fade setup, the breakout setup, and the pullback continuation setup. So I'm hoping that at this point, everyone is at a point where they understand at least the mechanics of how the program works and how to make use of it. Now, as I mentioned in earlier webinars, the best thing is to practice with it on sim, right? Spend a couple of days using it on sim, test out all the different order types on sim so you kind of understand how they work. And once you are comfortable enough with using the program and you understand kind of the mechanics of it, then and only then should you switch to a live account. All right, guys, so at this point, I will cover any questions that are being posted, and then we will wrap it up, and we'll catch up again probably tomorrow morning. Okay, so Armando's saying if you have the auto trade on, so I'm assuming you mean auto update. If you have the auto update on, can you move the entry by a few ticks if you want to? Yeah, I mean, you can, so like we'll just test it with
Order
this.
submitted.
And if you want to move the entry, you can see that we can do it here and it will adjust your order, right, in real time. So yeah, you can still do that. But if you want to manually set the order and make sure the program doesn't like re-update the entry, then just uncheck auto update. You can also check aggressive entry, if you want, but if you're going to manually change the entry, then uncheck auto update so that it doesn't, mess with whatever entry you have set. Jen is saying, on the PC setup, how do I tell it that I want my PC entry one tick ahead of the fib levels, but also have the ability to check off the aggressive entry option in addition? Let me check if we have that here. I don't think we have something like that. So Lewis, if you want to chime in, if you know something that I don't, feel free. But as far as I know, I don't think that it lets you set like, oh, I want my entry to be, by default, one or two ticks ahead. So it's almost like a default entry offset for the PC setup. As far as I know, I don't think we have that.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So right now it just takes the level as the entry, but yeah, we don't have anything
Okay.
at present.
But that can
Yeah.
probably be built in. I think it's a good idea.
Yep.
Yeah. So we can build in kind of a default entry offset into the pullback continuation settings. So you'll have a default entry offset, kind of like how we have the breakout level entry offset, and then you'll have an aggressive entry offset. So yeah, your default you could set to like one or two ticks, and your aggressive might be 1.5 points or something. Totally doable. Nice, good idea. Thanks, Jen. That's kind of the purpose of this private beta group. You guys are going to help shape the software with the ideas. Matthew's saying, in a fast open test drive, is there a way of setting the anchor time to the RTH open? So there's no way to quickly set the anchor time. So the anchor time is not a field that you can edit, right? Like this is display only. So if you were dealing with a open drive scenario, then you would have to plot this and you'd have to kind of manually, get it to the current price, right? Or you'd have to get it to kind of the current swing low. Um, but I'm just wondering if pullback continuation is even the right setup to use to get an open drive because it may not even pull back like 38% in certain situations. Now, keep in mind that open drives are not to be traded in a vacuum or in isolation, right? So an open drive is not just a situation where the market puts in a wide range bar. Um, the ones that work or the ones that matter are the times where the open drive is breaking the market outside of a defined balance area or range. And in that situation, you can have a preset breakout setup ready to go in the event of an open drive. So I think instead of using pullback continuation, you might be better off playing around with the breakout setup to take that trade. So I think, as we get more examples of different kind of scenarios and contexts and how to trade them, um, over time, I think what would be really beneficial is if we could all work on building a small library or archive of short videos showing how to use the program in various situations. So, that's something that as I get more time, I'll try to do as well. But, in majority of open drive situations, a breakout setup can work. The time where a pullback setup can work really well for an open drive is if the open drive happens just very quickly and now the market's already moved 10, 15 points. In that situation, PC is going to be probably the better way to go. But in those situations, you will have enough time to like set up the PC trade, right? So, there will be plenty of time to set it up. So let me get out of this so we can play around with this. But, you can see that like moving the swing low, swing high, or the anchor, it's pretty quick. You can literally use your mouse roller right over this, right? So when it gets highlighted, you can start using your mouse roller to kind of move it back and forth. And, it's quite easy and quick to do so. So I think even if you were going to use a pullback setup in a open drive context, you could do it pretty quickly using, just kind of mousing over it, rolling it, or just even hitting the arrows a few times. Let's see. So Armando's saying if you have Chart Trader, do you recommend we turn it off and just use Vulcan Trader? I like seeing the plotted orders on the chart. Can I substitute this with the VT plot function? You can still have Chart Trader running. I don't think it's going to make a difference. I would just say use, Vulcan Trader for all your order entries and exits and management. But, there's nothing wrong with using Chart Trader as a visual aid. And, with the plot order, I think this function is more useful before you submit the trade, right? Because it allows you to visualize the trade without actually taking the trade, right? So without even submitting it, you can visualize various trade setups. And after that, once you've submitted it, then you can rely on the visual aid from Chart Trader because now the order is going to show up in the book. And if you move an order around right on the chart, that does get communicated back to Vulcan Trader, and it will, they are in sync with each other. Kevin's saying, let's say you take an early scale on a third of a position, but then decide to put it back on. How do you do that? Yeah, right now there's no way of, putting that third back on, right? Right now we've kind of built it to handle uh, simple trade sequences, right? Where you're getting in the trade, you're taking your targets, and then you're moving on to the next trade. So simplicity was the priority in the beginning. Um, as we build this thing out, there can be features that are kind of more catered towards either more active traders or professional traders, or there'll be different things that come out of it. But right now, there's no way to say, oh, that third that I took off, let me put it back on. Now, Lewis and I, we've had discussions about um, even building like automated algorithms around that idea of putting the trade, putting the scale out back on. And, we'll see. That's something that will probably end up showing up in a future iteration. But right now, I think that it's better to keep things simple and kind of, build out the core of the program, and then the bells and whistles and that kind of stuff can come later. Next question: what is the purpose of break even when you have the option such as original stop that can scratch your trade? So break even is if you simply want to move your target or your stop to break even, but the intention is different. See, when you're hitting break even, what you're saying is, I want to get out if my market, if the market gets me back to break even. I just want to get out of the trade at that point in time. With the stop, you have various options, right? You can move it to, the original stop, the swing, the zero risk, and the original entry. So, I think that break even is just kind of a quick way to try to get out at break even. It doesn't ensure, by the way, that you'll get out at break even. For example, let's say that your trade is currently underwater, right? So let's say that you're in a trade and right now you're taking a little bit of heat. If you hit break even, it's not going to move your stop. It's going to move your targets to try to get you out at break even. So if you want to get out like immediately, don't use break even. Use the close button for that. And we can maybe test this out real quick. So it's at 77.75 right now in the playback. So let's just go ahead and let's just take a short at 77.75.
Order filled.
Okay, so we're filled at 78, and if the market goes against us a bit, which if I recall it would, let me speed this up a little bit. So like right now, it's a little bit higher than our entry price, and if we hit break even, right, exit break even, you'll see what it does is it'll make all of these targets
order filled
78. And well, in this case, it moved into that entry because we're running it on like 20x speed. But the function is a little bit different, right? So break even is kind of like, hey, I want to get out at break even. It doesn't mean that you will. Mateen is saying, just as you did with the retracement levels, can we develop a balance area rectangle visual that has an anchor to the left bottom corner of the rectangle? I'm sure it can be done. I don't think that it's going to be like top of the list to do right now, to be very honest with you. There's a bunch of other stuff that needs to be done first, but I like the idea. I think it's interesting, and it would just kind of depend on, how it gets used. And yeah, for now, I'm going to say that it's probably not going to be built in for quite some time, because any feature requests, by the way, that come in, it's not just, oh, let's do it or let's not do it. Like everything that went into this program required a lot of thought. because it was very important to know what to put in, and it was even more important to know what to keep out, right? What to not put in the program. Anything that could complicate matters for the traders, anything that is not really going to be, it's not going to be a help with execution is not going to be in here. Because remember, this is not a charting platform, right? This is an execution platform. So, like if you just want to draw a rectangle, you can draw that anyway on your existing charts, right? Um, and all you're really saying is, can I draw an auto expanding rectangle on the chart, right? And that might just be like kind of a side indicator that doesn't really maybe, you know, it's not as tied in with the program as the pullback setup is. But, it's something that I'll think about, right? So I do appreciate you bringing it up. But yeah, it's something that I'll spend more time thinking about. And if I can kind of, figure out like, hey, there is kind of a way to make this work and it's helpful to everyone. Because, the way that I've seen most software programs go to complete shit over the years is that they took feedback from everyone and they did it. Like any idea any user sent in, they just put it in. Whether it made sense or not, whether it really helped everyone as a collective or not, they just put in the features, right? And that's how a lot of these softwares get so bulky and heavy and almost unusable over time and overly complicated over time, is because the developers just keep putting in every feature request. So with this, we're going to be extremely mindful of the features that get put in, and it has to be something that helps everyone. It has to be something that is for the collective good of everyone involved. And if it is, then we're definitely going to put it in, right? Like that idea of 2 ticks ahead of the retracement level, that's a great idea. We're definitely going to put that in, but there are other ideas that are nice, like they're nice to have, but they may not be essential to the program. And they may lead to confusion for a big part of the group. So if that's the case, then, we're going to leave them out. But I just wanted to kind of explain that just to give you the philosophy behind, what goes in, what goes out, or what doesn't go into the program. Armando saying, if I have the zones indicator for Ninja, do you recommend plot the zones using Vulcan Trader instead of that indicator? I like that I can be selective about which zones I want to plot. If a zone is no longer valid, I can simply unplot it. Does that make sense? Yeah. I mean, that's really the whole idea that, maybe not all the zones are relevant to us. So, why, kind of clutter the chart with all of these zones when really, the one that's relevant might look something like this. Like these are really the main zones that, today are relevant. And then if we want to trade the broken resistance, the other thing is we can double click on the S or L to flip a zone from long or short, right? So if I wanted to do this, now this becomes essentially a support zone. And that's the other nice part, right? Is that if you flip it here, it'll change to green on the chart as well. The zones indicator doesn't do that, right? So the zones indicator that comes for NinjaTrader 8, that one is kind of like this, right? It's more static. It just plots resistance, support. If it's resistance, it still stays red, even after the market has taken it out. But with the Vulcan Trader program, the nice thing is that it does let you select what zones you want to plot. And at the same time, if you want to flip it, now it's not going to do it automatically for you, right? Because that would be very unnerving if the program automatically changed your long to a short or vice versa, right? But if you double click the LS column here, on any of these, it will flip it from long to short. And when that happens, the color will change as well. So yeah, I think that you could probably use the zones via Vulcan Trader. Kevin's saying, how do we use the playback feature? Okay, so for the playback feature, what you'll have to do is first you'll have to be connected to your, actual data feed that brings your historical and real-time data. So for example, I use IQ feed for my real-time data, and then I use the continuum feed for execution, just to kind of talk to NinjaTrader, right? But my main feed is IQ feed. So you'd have to be connected to that. And then you would go into tools, import historical data, and that would bring up this screen. You'd have to go to get market replay data, select the instrument, and then the date that you want to get the playback data for. So if you wanted to do it just for today, then you would probably pick, the 16th and today, just so you have the overnight session as well. But yeah, it's, day by day, right? So it doesn't let you kind of select the whole date range and, get everything in a single go. It is done kind of day by day, but you can pick whatever days you want to do. Download, it's pretty quick. And once you've done that, then you would disconnect your other data feeds, because the playback connection, when it's being used, it's the only connection that can be used. So you'll have to disconnect the other stuff, connect the playback connection over here, go to Vulcan Trader, select playback. They'll sync up. There's a little window that comes up that lets you play, pause, set the time of where you want to start the chart. So, if you right click on this, you can say go to, and then you can put in the exact, time that you want to start the chart from, and then you hit play and it starts from there. You can control the speed over here. I mean, it's a really nice feature actually. This playback in NinjaTrader is really, really beneficial. It's a great way to just kind of practice, because you can control the speed of it. You can run it on faster speed, so you can go through an entire day in like 30 minutes if you wanted to, and really kind of get that practice going. You could slow down where you want to slow down. So it is a nice thing to have. John's saying it took me half an hour to find that the LNS toggled. Great feature, especially when refading a major zone like a bull bear for multiple entries. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a really nice thing to have. And if you think that there's a zone where like you're not sure, let's say it's a bull bear, it could work as a long or a short. The other thing you can do is just create a copy of it, right? So you could just make a copy of that, and one could be set to short, one could be set to long, and you can kind of play with both of them, right? And if you copy both up here, they'll be side by side, right? So anytime you make a copy of a zone or you create your own custom one, it goes to the top of the grid, right? And there's this bigger separator between the two, telling you, hey, these are the ones that you loaded from the file, and these are the ones you made. But any custom zones by default go to the top. And the intention or the idea there is that if you're creating this custom zone, you probably want to be more focused on it, or you want to at least differentiate it from the preloaded ones and know that, hey, these were the ones that I made today. And yeah, you could even set it up this way, where you could have, long and short already pre-staged, and then depending on how the bull bear responds, maybe you take one or the other. But yeah, there's so many different ways of using it, and I think, all of us are going to be learning new and interesting ways to utilize the program, and get on board some of these moves, or really just improve our execution overall. Roy is saying, can you go over like what's going on behind the scenes that causes the stop to change? It's really based on how much the market has moved in terms of R. So it looks like kind of, okay, it's moved X number of points or this much R, and now, it makes sense to move the stop to like the swing high or swing low. And then when it hits like, your next threshold might be 2R, right? And remember, these are all set by you, right? So in R, it's telling you, hey, when it hits 2R, well, now move it to the next potential spot, right? So the options are, the original stop, the swing high low, the zero risk stop, and then the entry, right? So those are kind of the four possible places that the stop can be, and the thresholds define when to move them to each of the levels. That's kind of what's going on behind the scenes. Kevin's saying, I don't have IQ feed, just NinjaTrader Continuum. I think that should work. I think if you have NinjaTrader Continuum, I think Continuum has historical data. Now, it might not have as much historical as IQ Feed, but I think it does have historical data. So try using it. I don't think you need to get IQ Feed, you know. I already have IQ Feed. That's why I decided to use it. It's in my opinion a better data feed, but I already had it. It's not like I went out and got it. I already had it for Investor RT, so I might as well use it here too.
Hey, Wace,
Yeah.
just a quick comment. I've made a few posts on the forum about it, but there are some reasons to have an IQ feed connection, one of which would be the tick, and then the other one would be the continuous futures contract. Works better with IQ feed versus continuum. So just so people are aware of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, broker data feeds are never all that great, right? Because they're really just kind of meant to support real-time order execution. Um, so, you know, it's always better to have kind of a dedicated feed that is meant for charting and historical data. But now, Lewis, will the continuum still give them playback though for like at least the last couple of days or something?
Yeah, it'll work for playback just fine.
Okay,
So
so it
just a
just it just
just
doesn't
general
have.
commentary on yeah, whether it's worthwhile to have IQ feed.
I mean, to me, like when it comes to trading, um, and looking at other businesses, like if you really approach it as a business, then like the fixed costs of trading are just so relatively low, right? Like IQ feed is, I don't know, something like $100 a month or 120 or something, I think, with the exchange fees and stuff. Um, and if that guarantees that you have, you know, historical data, high quality data, to me it's worth it to have that. And that's not just now. I'm not saying that sitting here now after trading for 11 years and saying, hey, it's worthwhile getting all this stuff. I mean, even when I started back in like '02 or '03, um, when I knew nothing about the markets, like brand new getting into it, I still wanted to kind of make sure that I had the right setup. Like I didn't want that to be an excuse for me. So like I still back in the day got like 3 screens, which back in '02 were actually quite expensive. Now screens are super cheap. Still got the right data feed, like kind of paid for the stuff that I needed to pay for to make sure that I had the right tools. So yeah, definitely helpful to have, but I guess not a absolute requirement. Hans says I've been using NinjaTrader 7 and I'm trying to load Vulcan Trader. I need to figure out how to load MES zones, and the license key is not working. Is there a post in the community? Well, it has to be on NT8, number one, right? So that's a requirement. Like this doesn't work with NinjaTrader 7. Um, I think the best thing is probably either shoot me an email or post in the community under user feedback the specific issue you're having with the install because I tried to make the installation kind of as straightforward as I possibly could. Um, so like if you go to that URL vulcantrader.co/download, right? I mean, this is it, right? So I've tried to make it where it's step by step, and as long as you're not jumping ahead, because like, some of the emails I've gotten for support, like I can tell some of you jumped ahead, or like didn't complete all the steps and just wanted to get everything going, right away. But if you follow it step by step, right? Click here to download the indicators. Okay, now you got the indicators. Go to NinjaTrader 8, you know, close open workspaces, import the new file, right? All that stuff. Like it's step by step. It's literally step by step. Once you've done that, then click on download Vulcan Trader. That takes you to this page. And again, step by step, right? Setting it up. And then at the end, watch this video. Because, some of the emails I got were about like, the account not loading or the symbol not loading. Well, it's because it's covered in this video. I know that all of us are kind of tight on time, but it's worthwhile to make time for this. Mateen's saying, I like stop management a lot. However, would it make sense to have a snapback feature? Let's say a stop is moved up when ES hits 1 hour, but then goes back down, could the stop snap back to original? Today I got stopped out because the stop had moved up. Well, you can always change it yourself. So, if you are in a trade, and
Order filled.
let's take this one again, right? Just as an example. So if you are in a trade, and let's say, the stop does move, and so for example, over here, let's say we'll move our stop to swing, right? 83 quarter. You can move it back by right-clicking on it, right? So you can right-click here and go back to your original stop. That's kind of how you could do it, is either by here, or you could manually move it, on the actual stop column. So that's the other way you could move it. If you don't want the automatic stop management, then you can uncheck this. So let's say that, there's a trade where you've already gotten your scale out, you're already kind of sitting pretty, not a whole lot of risk on, and you don't want the program to automatically start updating your stops. Well, then just uncheck auto stop management, and it won't mess with your stop. It'll leave it where it is. So that's the other way to do it. Armando's saying, to confirm, if I want to plot the zones on a chart using Vulcan Trader, I have to add the Vulcan plotter indicator. That's right. That's right. So Vulcan plotter is the only indicator that can be on multiple charts, right? That's the other issue that at least one trader had. He was putting all the indicators on multiple charts, right? And that was creating a lot of problems and, kind of collision, communication, all that stuff, because the Vulcan indicators and the Vulcan Trader indicator should only be on one chart. That's it. If it's on more than one, then you're going to run into trouble, right? Either a connection won't work or something weird's going to happen. So those two indicators, Vulcan indicators and Vulcan Trader, only on one chart. And ideally, you leave that chart alone, right? Ideally, you don't mess with that chart again, and then you use a different chart for like your visualization and everything else. And on that chart, yes, you would set it up where it has the Vulcan plotter and it doesn't have any other Vulcan Trader indicators on it, and that's how you would do it. So yeah, that's the way to go. So here we have a different chart. Set it to whatever time frame. Let's just set it 10-minute, and then we would just add Vulcan plotter to this, and that's what's gonna plot your Fibonacci retracement and all that stuff and the zones. But yeah, it's best to use a separate chart for that. All right, guys, any other questions about the program, about the community or anything else? All right, so looks like that's it in terms of the questions. So like I said, I think that the best way to get a handle on this is by using it, right? The more you kind of play around with it, get acclimated with it, the easier it'll be. Spend a couple of days on sim, then switch to live. The only other thing I'll point out here, by the way, is there is the option in the grid to click on show only calculated. So, before the market opens, the idea is that we're going to go through and, kind of set up or stage potential trades. It doesn't mean we're taking all of them, but, we know that, hey, if the market comes down to 47.5 to 53.5, yeah, we want to buy that, right? We might want to buy initial support. We might want to short initial resistance. So we can kind of, stage these orders before the market even opens and at least kind of visualize, what they look like, what the targets are, all that. So we can get this whole thing kind of set up for probably 80, 90% of days before the market opens. And let's say now, we don't want to see all the other zones, right? Because there's a bunch of zones loaded here. Maybe they're not relevant to us. So if you click show only calculated, you'll see it'll only show you the zones that you have actually calculated the entry exits for. So it's a way to kind of clean up the grid. If you don't want to see everything, just click Show Only Calculator. It'll take everything else away and only show you the zones that you've actually, set up the entries exits for. And if you uncheck it, of course, it'll bring everything back. So I think that's kind of a nice little feature as well. Okay, so let's see if there's anything else. Armando saying, do you plan to add a section for us to comment on the market, like in a chat? You can use the Vulcan trading section, trading with Vulcan Trader. You can use that to kind of post, during the day if you want. I mean, there's no chat on there, and that's intentional. There's no like real-time chat room or anything, and that's again by design. But you can post any thoughts or any trades or whatever, any ideas you have if you want to kind of, share that with the group or get feedback or, just even just post it out there for yourself. It's not a chat, right? So I wouldn't think of it as like a real-time chat because that's not what it is. But if you want to bounce ideas that are not like time sensitive, right? That you just want to kind of get everyone's view on something, then yeah, post it in the trading with Vulcan Trader section. That can work. Kevin's saying I added the Vulcan plotter on a ES chart, but it does not show the zones as okay. So yeah, so Kevin, it's only gonna work for the symbol that is active over here, right? So like you can't like if you add it to ES, but then your active symbol is MES, it's only gonna talk to the symbol that you have set over here. And it's not going to talk to more than one at the same time, at least in the current iteration of it. In the long run, the plan is to have the program support trading multiple markets, right? So you could be trading micro, ES, crude oil, NAS, whatever, right? So in the long run, the program is going to evolve into supporting multiple markets, but right now, in kind of iteration 1, it only supports trading one instrument at a time. And so if you're trading ES, then you would have to set it to ES. The other thing is in order to change the symbol, right? So let me go ahead and just flatten this out because it won't let you change the symbol when you have an active order or an active trade going, right? So let's just flatten it out.
Order filled.
Okay, so now you can see that I can change it, right? But in order to change it, I have to change the chart as well, right? So if you want to change from MES to ES, you'd have to come in here and change this to ES20, and then you change this to ES, right? And you can see there's like a little momentary disconnect when that happens because all the communication between Vulcan Trader and Ninja is happening through the chart, right? Right now, actually, this is not going to work right now. Bad example, because I'm running in playback mode and I haven't downloaded the data for today for ES. So this is probably not going to work. But in a live market environment or on sim, that's what you would have to do. You'd have to change the chart to ES and then, okay, so it actually is working. Just took a little bit of time. But, we're in playback mode, so that's kind of normal. But you can see that's what would have to happen. You'd have to change the chart, and then you have to come in here and change the symbol. And if you change the symbol and you haven't changed the chart, then you'll get this message, right? Where it's going to alert you that, hey, Ninja is set to ES, Vulcan Trader is set to MES, pick one. Either change this back to ES or change the chart to match the MES, right? So that's the idea. And, we'll have more webinars, we'll have more discussions, and, we'll go over any other quirks or little things that, come up with the program. So, we'll have time to do that. All right, guys, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up over here. We're about an hour and 15 minutes in. And like always, the recording will be posted to the community later on this evening. So if you want to go over anything, review anything that we discussed, then the recording should be up by later on today. All right, guys, that is a wrap. I hope we're all off to a good start. I hope you guys traded well today. I hope the program helped you stay on the right side. And we will catch up later on in the week. Take care.